and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Novak, and I'm here to tell you a few true stories. If you hadn't seen, earlier this week I released an interview with Rodney Barnes, a writer well known for his work in film, television, comic books, and now podcasting. We had an excellent conversation about the TV and film industry, and he shared so much wisdom for my fellow horror authors. I learned quite a bit, and I hope you will too. Let's get on with the true horror submissions from your fellow listeners. The first submission is from Imogene. Hi, Shelby. I wanted to start by saying I really regret not listening to your podcast sooner. You're amazing. But I listen to podcasts while I drive for work, and I was apprehensive about listening to a podcast geared towards lulling listeners to sleep. If it helps, I've been binge listening. Hopefully I'll be caught up before you potentially read this on the show, and Scare You to Sleep is one of my favorite podcasts amongst my regular rotation now. Thank you so much. I can count the number of paranormal experiences I've had on just one hand, and I don't feel like any are particularly exciting, so I've been apprehensive about sharing any for the show. After listening to you read a handful of similar experiences, I don't feel quite the same way, so I hope both you and my fellow listeners enjoy what I have to share. The two most profound experiences I've had thus far in my life have been with the same entity, or at least what I presume was the same entity. I don't remember exactly when these encounters occurred, but they took place sometime between spring 2020 and fall 2022. The first encounter was maybe a year or so after I moved into a house near historic downtown, city name redacted for privacy, Minnesota. I had moved in with two friends, one who shared the basement with me, we'll call her Carmen, and another who had a room upstairs, we'll call her Abby. I was upstairs, leaning on the doorframe of Abby's bedroom, talking to her as she laid on her bed. Meanwhile, Carmen was going in and out of the front door and the basement. Since I wasn't fully inside the room, I had a full view of the bathroom door, which was right next to Abby's bedroom door, as well as the living room and front entry to the house, all of which were well lit by sunlight coming in from the large living room windows. In my peripheral, I saw a black figure coming towards me and go into the bathroom, which I assumed was Carmen, until Carmen came back inside through the front door. I think I remember Abby asking me what was wrong because I had left mid-conversation to check the bathroom, expecting to see someone, though now I didn't know who. You can probably guess, but it was empty. All I can add to this part of the retelling is that I had seen something black of a comparable height to Carmen walk into the bathroom less than 5 feet away from me, and since I had seen it from my peripheral, I had assumed it was Carmen because she was wearing a black sweatshirt. At the time, we couldn't recreate what I had or hadn't seen. If it wasn't for my second experience, I would have assumed it was just a trick of the eyes or light. The second encounter took place sometime after Carmen had moved out, so it was just me living downstairs and Abby upstairs. I had walked out of my room, which opened into the downstairs living area. The staircase going up to the ground floor was directly across the living area from me, and the doors to the bathroom and laundry room were on the wall adjacent to both myself and the staircase. After exiting my room and facing the staircase, I watched as a black humanoid figure crossed from the base of the staircase towards the laundry room. At the time, there was sunlight filtering down the staircase from the floor above, and I had the light above my bedroom door turned on, but the rest of the basement lights were turned off. I investigated the laundry room and bathroom, and both were empty. I went upstairs and asked Abby if she had come downstairs to do laundry, but she said she hadn't. During our time living there together, Abby had heard things around the house like voices and doors/cupboards opening and closing when no one else was home. But I hadn't experienced anything like that, and she had never seen anything like what I had described. Since I moved out and Abby had stayed, neither of us have had any strange experiences like those we previously had. So what do you think? Were both my experiences just tricks of the light, eyes, or mind? Or were they one of few encounters with something not quite of this world or plane of existence? Thank you for reading and for all you do, Shelby. Thank you for writing in, Imogene. That is so interesting, and I do have some theories. So, one thing I've heard from people who are more sensitive to things, and I've personally experienced something like this, is sometimes people can be sensitive in different ways. Like, I've noticed a lot of my experiences I've had, especially my one really big experience that I think I've told on the show before, have been audible and not necessarily something I see with my eyes, but I hear them as if it's right, it's very real. Whereas a lot of other people will experience something that they see, an apparition or something. And it is interesting that you said, like, your roommate heard all these things and you never heard anything, and you saw things and she never saw anything. So bear with me, skeptics out there. I understand, again, I'm skeptical myself, but let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say maybe both of you are sensitive in different ways. Maybe Abby is something of an audible, sensitive person, and you're a visual one. And like I said, most of my experiences have been audible, whereas like other people in my family have visual experiences. So I'm not a professional paranormal or parapsychologist or anything, but that does sound like maybe that could be what was going on and why both of you had experiences, but they were so different. Anyway, thank you so much for writing in. This next submission is from Jasmine. Hey Shelby, longtime listener here. You have one of the most soothing narrating voices I've ever heard, and you're a fantastic author. Keep up the spectacular work. You guys, I promise I don't leave these in just to like toot my own horn. I usually just copy and paste the whole email. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm just using this to like blow up my own ego. Okay. Your true horror / dark Reddit episodes are one of my favorite things to listen to, and I have so many creepy happenings that have occurred throughout my life that you may have enough content for a whole episode. I thought I'd shoot a couple of these over to you on the off chance you might read a few for other listeners to enjoy. And if they don't make it to the podcast, you might get some chills from them anyway. FYI, I have dyslexia, so please forgive me for any spelling errors or any word that might seem to be in the wrong order. For some backstory, all the women in my family, both living and departed, are known as witchy women and have some sort of gifts / sensitivities to the supernatural. For instance, my mother can seemingly sense if a traumatic event has happened to a place or person. My sister used to have vivid memories of a past life and had a rather chilling imaginary friend, a shadow person with no eyes called Captain, who had a strong dislike for closed cabinets and doors. My mom always says it's been the same for most women in our family as far back as she's aware. I think one day I'd love to dive into our ancestry to see if there's any cause for this. She said my grandmother would constantly experience things, but wouldn't like to talk about it for fear of giving the entity more power. Myself, I always seem to be attracting all kinds of things. However, I like to treat things to have happened to me with a healthy dose of skepticism and will try to look for a logical explanation before jumping straight to a ghost. Anyway, enough backstory, let's get creepy. Trigger warning, suicide, and a nickname some might find offensive. When I was roughly 6 months old, my mother moved into a flat inhabited by an entity she fondly named Swinging Richard. His namesake will be clear shortly. Before she moved into the apartment, she was informed that the previous tenant had unfortunately passed away on the property, but as she felt no malice there, she moved in regardless, and it wasn't long before things started happening. My mom would wake up in the middle of the night to hear something swinging in the attic. Think that creak you hear when a gate is swinging and something lightly hitting a wall. During the day, her dog Spook would sit directly under the attic hatch, whining and staring directly upwards. Lights would switch on and off by themselves randomly, and the door to my room would open and close throughout the night. Again, my mom didn't feel any malicious vibes and would learn to coexist with Richard. After living there a few months, a neighbor asked how she could stand living there after knowing what had happened. My mom, confused, said, "People die all the time, and why should it bother her that someone had unfortunately passed in the space she was currently living?" The neighbor said it wasn't just the fact that someone had passed there that was creepy, it was the fact that he hung himself in the attic, and it was a few weeks before someone found him. When my mom returned home, she decided to acknowledge him and told him he's more than welcome to stay as long as he stopped tormenting the dog, and if she left the door open to my room, could he please stop closing it as it was waking me up every time he did it. After that, the swinging in the attic stopped, and the door to my room never again shut by itself. Lights would still shut on and off by themselves, and footsteps could still sometimes be heard, but my mom and Richard lived together in harmony for 2 years before we moved. She believes he was just a lonely man who wanted someone to acknowledge he was there and was intrigued by the new baby in his home. We still sometimes talk about him, and I would like to think he's happy his memory is being kept alive. From the age of 8 to 12, my family moved to a house that rested on the edge of Epping Forest. We could literally open the back gate and step into the forest. It's still one of my favorite places I have ever lived, despite the events that happened whilst living there. Epping Forest is notorious for being haunted and has a history of gangsters disposing of bodies there. I'm not sure if being so close to the forest was the cause of a lot of activity, or it would have happened regardless of where we lived. My sister and I were sharing a room and had bunk beds to sleep in. Being the oldest, I got first choice of what bunk I wanted and chose the top. The beds were located behind the door, so if you were to open the door, it would sometimes hit the bed frame if you opened the door with enough force. I could also peer over the top of the door frame. I was 9 years old and woke up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. It had just been my birthday, and my grandparents had given me a bright pink, glittery radio alarm clock that glowed in the dark for my birthday. It was one of my prized possessions. It was unusual for me to wake up throughout the night at this age, so that fact in itself made me feel on edge. I remember hearing creaking and shuffling along the landing, and thought perhaps it was my mom, or that my younger sister had gotten out of bed, or the dogs had woken me up. I watched as the door swung and hit the bed frame, but no one came into the bedroom. Confused and feeling more on edge, I climbed down to the end of the bed and decided to look over the door frame to see what was going on. I can still remember what it was in vivid detail to this day. It was a woman, not my mother, with dark, curly hair, standing in the doorframe. She was wearing a gray, frilly dress. I now know it was a Victorian-era wedding dress, with a veil obscuring the majority of her face. I could only see her mouth, and she had a small, serene smile on her face. She tilted her head almost in the same manner a dog would before stepping backwards and fading into the darkness of the landing. Naturally, being a child and not understanding what was happening, I was terrified. I hid under my covers and eventually fell asleep. In the morning, I peeked over the doorframe to see if it was safe before leaving the comfort of my bed and launching myself downstairs to immediately tell my mom what had happened the night before. I was fully expecting my mom to tell me it had been a nightmare and that I wasn't allowed to read Goosebumps anymore before bed. She sat me down and told me that she knew exactly what I had seen, as she had seen her herself when she was also a child, and that my Nan had also seen her, and that she was the family ghost. Again, I definitely need to find some time to sit down and trace my family tree, as she's believed to be someone from our family who likes to come back each generation to check up on us. But no one knows exactly who she was or what her story is. This was the day I found out about ghosts and spirits, and that they weren't just floating around in bed sheets waiting to jump out at opportune moments and scare people. My mother told me that everyone in our family experienced things one way or another, but the woman seemed to have a greater affinity for it, to always remember to never be afraid of the dead, as it's only the living that could hurt you. But if I was ever scared, to tell whatever was bothering me that it was unwanted, and only welcome to stay if it meant no harm, and would quit doing the things that scared me. This is the day that sparked an interest in everything supernatural for me. Strange small things would always happen at this house. Lights turning on and off, footsteps running up the stairs before you, almost like someone was trying to beat you at a race. Things moving and cabinets always opening and closing by themselves. It would never bother me, unless I was in the bathroom and the light would turn off by itself, leaving me in pitch black. But I would always say, "You're not welcome here if you're going to do that." And the light would turn back on. This is where we also discovered I had an annoying effect on technology that I couldn't control. This was the early 2000s, so we had a CRT TV, the chunky box styles of TV, and I couldn't stand closer than 6 feet to the TV, otherwise the image would distort to static. I used this multiple times to my advantage if my sister had the TV remote and was watching something I didn't want to watch. This also happened if I was too close to FM radios, and still happens to this day to an old radio we use at work. I regularly get yelled at by my colleagues for going too close to the radio and distorting it to static. If anyone has any explanation to what is causing this, I would love to hear it. I have so many stories of things happening whilst living in that house, but don't want to take too much time writing about it, as I have other stories I'm itching to share. I was 14 years old and was asked to house sit and pet sit for my grandparents whilst they went away for a few days. They lived in an old barn conversion in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles of farmland and woods. Excited to be given such a grown-up task, I said yes, so long as my best friend Tiff could stay with me. Being in the middle of nowhere, the risk of us throwing parties was minimal, so they agreed. The first day was spent with us doing teenage girl things, doing each other's makeup, photo shoots in the fields and woods, and making mini film and skits on Tiff's new phone. As night fell, Tiff started to get quite creeped out at the sounds coming from the fields and woods, as she hadn't grown up in the countryside, so wasn't used to the quiet that you never get in the city or the wildlife. I explained to her what the various sounds were and what animal was making what sound, and distracted her with stargazing, as there was little light pollution and amazing views. The following day came, and I suggested going exploring in the woods with the dogs. My grandparents knew the farmers who owned the land and the woods, and we were welcome to walk them so long as we caused no damage along the way. We spent a few hours outside and came home with 2 exhausted Labradors and sore feet from walking so far. Tiff said she was going to go and grab us both a drink from the kitchen whilst I got a treat for the dogs. Whilst I got them both settled, I hear a scream from Tiff in the kitchen, followed by a bang from the kitchen door being slammed. Myself and the dogs scrambled to see what the commotion was, to find Tiff hunched on the floor, pale. I asked what was wrong, and she just pointed towards the now closed kitchen door. My grandparents had a 15-foot banquet-style table in the center of the kitchen with 10 chairs, 4 on each side and 1 at each end, made of oak. It was incredibly heavy, and I struggled to move a single chair whilst trying to sit at it for family events. The table had been pushed all the way to the opposite side of the kitchen, and each chair had been pushed to each side of the kitchen, leaving a large empty space in the middle of the kitchen. Both dogs huffed, wandering out of the kitchen, both giving Tiff a sniff to see if she was okay, before putting themselves to bed in their crates. Understandably, Tiff was very shaken up before I told her never to be afraid of the dead, as it's only the living that would hurt you, and that something was just trying to prank us and was welcoming her to the house. I told her we needed to call my mom to come and help us move the furniture back, as we wouldn't be able to move it ourselves. The following day, we experienced someone letting the dogs out into the garden, despite the door being locked, and I was the only one with the key, and all of the pictures being taken off the walls. After all of this, Tiff said she was never going to agree to house sit with me ever again. The last two events happened more recently. I moved into a flat with my then boyfriend, now husband. It was in a rather small building, only 9 units, 3 on each floor. We knew and got on well with all our neighbors. I started getting regular night terrors that would leave me waking up terrified and covered in sweat, but never could say what exactly they were about, just that something was watching me, and it was terrifying. It progressed to me waking up with bruises and deep scratches on my legs. My husband started questioning what I was doing in my sleep as he worked nights and was never home, and I explained to him that there were always new ones whenever I woke up from night terrors. He's a big skeptic and suggested I was possibly sleepwalking and injuring myself. Things progressed again to get woken up to the sound of a newborn baby scream crying on the weekends when my husband was around. He would never be able to hear it. I asked all the neighbors if any of them had family visiting with a baby or had heard the baby crying in the middle of the night, and they hadn't. I was starting to lose my sanity when my friend suggested she come around and do a sage cleanse, as my usual method of "you're not welcome here" wasn't working. She came round and we went to each room saging, and immediately the space felt lighter. She caught this video a few hours after we had saged of the outside of the flat, and we originally thought nothing of it apart from being a little creepy that the only light flashing was the light outside my apartment, until we sent it to a mutual friend who told us around the 23rd second mark, you could hear a voice whispering, "Forgive me." Activity stopped after this incident. The last incident happened around 3 months ago, and I'm still confused as to what exactly happened. My colleague had picked me up for work. It was 4:30 Friday morning, and we were both pretty excited to get the day over and done with so the weekend could start. The final countdown was playing on the radio, and we hummed to it as we pulled into a petrol station to grab some Friday morning snacks with the windows down. As he went into the station, I started whistling the first part of the bridge before stopping to check my phone, and something whistled the next part of the bridge directly outside the car on the side I was sitting in. I was startled and started to get out of the car to look to see who had done it. My friend came out of the shop asking who had whistled so loudly, and we both looked around in confusion when we couldn't see anyone. Out of everything that has happened to me, this is probably the one that has left me scratching my head the most. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough now. This has taken me hours to write out, and I hope it makes some sort of sense. I have a load more stories. If you're ever interested in hearing any more of them, give me a shout. Thank you so much, Jasmine, and I did see the photos of your kitties, Loki and Luna, and they're so adorable. And thank you for I don't even know where to start. In fact, I have your file pulled up because I'm going to scroll back up to see if I miss anything. There was so much. I kind of considered stopping between each segment to talk about it. But first of all, Richard, that was crazy. I mean, I'm so glad it ended up just, your mom being able to be like, hey, can you please stop? And then it stopped. You seeing the Victorian woman in the gray dress was horrifying, and I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, because clearly, like you said, this is probably one of your ancestors, but I would have been just as terrified as you. I cannot even begin to imagine seeing a woman in a gray Victorian dress with a veil on, just standing outside my door at 3 a.m. Like, I don't know how, I can't even fathom how I would react. You mentioned that you have other stories. Yeah, feel free to send in whatever you have. I'd love to see more or read more of your stories. These were all incredibly fascinating, and you have had some run-ins that, just one of these would have me so scared, and you've had so many of them. So thank you again for taking the time to write all of that out. That was incredibly fascinating. Thank you, Jasmine. And our last submission of the night is from Zara. Hi, Shelby, longtime listener of the podcast. I especially love the true horror stories, and I thought it was time to tell my own. I've never told this to anyone except my mom, who I had to tell out of necessity. I'm a very private person that rarely lets people in or overshares, but I figured it was time to tell this short but very scary story. A few years ago, my husband and I moved into a rental house with our then 2-year-old. It was nothing special, just something to live in while we built our new forever home, a normal 2-story house in a normal suburban Texas neighborhood. A few weeks had gone by since we moved in, and we had settled into a routine with work and home life with our little one. One morning, on a weekday, I don't even remember what day, I woke up to what I thought was my mom calling my name from downstairs. My husband and I slept with our bedroom door open since our then 2-year-old had become a bit of an escape artist from her crib and sometimes toddled into our room at night. Our bedroom also faced the stairs. When we walked down directly ended at the front door. So had my mom walked in and started yelling my name, I would very clearly hear it from upstairs. Upon waking and hearing my name called out, I immediately knew something was wrong on many levels. My first thought was, why would my mom be walking in at 7 a.m. and yelling my name when she knew my daughter was sleeping? Also, my body had gone into full panic mode. At first, I thought I was experiencing sleep paralysis, which happens often, but never with an audible voice. I disproved the sleep paralysis by reaching over and looking at the time on my phone. 6:54 a.m. No texts or missed calls from my mom. I somehow got the courage to sit up in bed and heard her again. Zara? 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 Just my name, over and over again in my mother's voice, phrased as a question, but the tone, it was almost robotic, like someone had recorded her voice and was playing it over and over again. Something in me told me this is not my mother, that this can't even be real. I started thinking more quickly at this point, my first concern being my daughter at the end of the hall. But how could I get to her? If I stepped out of my room, whoever, whatever was down there would see me walk by the top of the stairs and alongside the banister. No, I thought, as long as whatever it is stays down there, I won't leave my room. If it is down there, the 3 of us will be safe upstairs. Zara! Zara! It called out again in the same robotic voice. My head was spinning. My thoughts had been racing this whole time, and for some reason I realized that in my initial panic, I didn't even think of waking my sleeping husband, who after the move had been working long hours and was sleeping deeply, almost like he would completely pass out at night. Right as I reached over to shake him, with the voice still calling out to me from downstairs, my 7 a.m. alarm started going off. I turned sides and almost fell out of the bed trying to shut the alarm off. I sat up abruptly, listening. Nothing. No more voice calling my name, no strange specter who thought it knew me, vying to get my attention. Silence. Utter, scary silence. I slowly got out of bed, walked to my door, and peered out around it, where I could see the first few steps of the stairs. All I could see was darkness, hazy with the sunlight that was trying to creep in from the living room across the way. I retreated and went into my adjoining bathroom to start brushing my teeth, just going through the motion of my mornings, all the while thinking of what I heard. Did I hear it? Maybe this was another form of sleep paralysis. But I was sitting up and checking my phone. The questions kept coming in my head over and over again with a constant rationalizing. I finally gave up arguing with myself, knowing my daughter would be waking up soon, and my husband expected me to wake him up 30 minutes after I woke up. I walked out of the bathroom, hesitant for a second, but once I stepped out, I felt a sense of calm. Like all the stress of the situation I woke up in the oppressive cloud that was hanging over, was gone. Somehow, I just knew it was safe to walk around the house. I decided to wake my husband up before I headed out of the bedroom. Bending over to shake him awake, he rolled over reluctantly. He looked at me sleepily, but all of a sudden scowled, not like his usual morning smile. He just stared at me a second and said, "Were you yelling my name earlier?" It was that moment I knew what people described as their blood ran cold. I could never describe the way I felt a chill go down my spine and settle into every pore of my body. In that moment, I'm assuming by the sheer surprise of what he said, I just shook my head no. He got up, mostly shaking it off as a bad dream, and went to wake our daughter up. I sat there stunned, but what could I do? Since the bad feeling was gone, I just gave up in a sense, and we headed out to start our day as usual. It never happened again. Nothing in our house seemed different. Nothing was moved out of place. The doors had been locked that morning when we went downstairs. No voice ever tried to call out again. I did tell this story to my mom, who, being a believer in the supernatural herself, thinks it was an evil entity trying to lure my husband and I to God knows where or for what. I'm just thankful it's never happened again. We have since moved and are living our lives now with our 7-year-old daughter with no incidences. Thanks again for taking the time to read through my story and keep up all the good work on the podcast. That was a very scary story. It's been kind of a thing lately. I've seen a lot of videos come up on TikTok and YouTube about mimics. Mimics have been kind of in vogue recently, it seems, in the TikTok supernatural world. And there have been a few videos that are allegedly of mimics. I don't know anything about mimics. This is kind of a new thing to me. I've been seeing the videos. Some of them seem pretty cheesy and fake to me, but just to be honest. But the first thing I thought of when I heard this story was the idea of a mimic. And like I said, some of the videos are very cheesy, but I've heard this type of thing for a long time. You hear about them a lot in the Appalachian region of the United States. A lot of people from that region will talk about hearing voices from the woods that sound just like loved ones calling your name. And I don't know what it is, but I've always heard not to go towards them. I think like you tend to not because you get such a bad feeling about it. And that is just so scary. It's like, I've talked on the show about like doppelgangers and things, but this seems to be something different because it seems like, oh God, I just got the craziest chills. I'm not kidding. I just got the craziest chills sitting here talking about this. Oh my God. That's so weird. My whole body just broke out in goosebumps. So I don't even remember what I was saying. Basically, this is scary, and don't go towards it if you hear your name. That's what I've always been told too. But it seems like most people don't go towards, or at least people, I guess, who are around to tell the story, they don't go towards it because you get this really bad feeling. Like, I should not go towards that there's something wrong. Like all your instincts light up. Like, this is wrong. There is something wrong. I should not go towards this. So that's very scary. I'm pretty jaded at this point from doing the show for so long, and I don't get full goosebumps often, like hardly ever. And so thank you, Sarah, for giving me full body chills. Thank you so much to all of you who submitted stories for this evening. If you'd like to follow the show, please follow it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at scareyoutosleep. If you'd like one of your stories featured on the show, please send it to scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. If it is one of these true stories, please put true stories in the subject line. Or if it's a fictional story, please note that as well. I'm so sorry for this short episode tonight. My Clara, if you're new here, Clara is my cat. She's having some health issues that I haven't slept. And if you can hear her in the background, I apologize. And I don't know if any of you have heard of feline hyperesthesia. That's what I'm pretty sure she has. And it's been a rough couple of days. I'm not going to lie. I'm very, very tired. I've not slept again. And my brain is kind of dead. You've all been there where you have literally not slept and your brain is just out the window. It's gone somewhere. So I'm going to go, and thank you for being here with me. Thank you for these amazing stories. Oh, you've joined the Patreon for ad-free episodes. What's all the normal stuff I say? I said the scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. Socials. If you want to follow me personally, you can follow me at Shelby B. Novak on Twitter and Instagram, and Threads. I started Threads, but Threads is, I don't know if it's for me. Well, we'll see. But I'm on Threads too, if you want to follow me there. It's like Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky. I haven't opened Blue Sky. I'm not even signed in. I got a new phone and I'm not even signed in on there. The social media I have already is enough to keep up with. But yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, I'm more active on Twitter at Shelby B. Novak. Oh, and quickly, the thing I baked this week was a quiche. I made a broccoli and white cheddar and Gouda quiche. And that is what I baked this week. And we'll see what the weekend holds. And I will see you next week. Go check out my interview with Rodney Barnes. It was so much fun. I feel so grateful for getting to just hang out and talk with him for an hour. Like, that's how I always see these interviews. And I'm really grateful that now people are coming to me with these. I know it's kind of a different speed for the show, but whenever someone amazing reaches out and wants to talk to you, like, the one I did with Stephen Graham Jones, and now with Rodney Barnes, like, I just want to talk to. People fascinate me. I love talking to people. I love talking to interesting people, and so I'm so grateful to get that opportunity to get to just talk to these very interesting people. So go check that out again. Okay, and again, I'm so sorry this is being cut a little short. I'm just, life happens. I'm very tired. If anyone has any tips, I guess, on feline hyperesthesia, send them my way. It's kind of a weird thing that there's no like cure. It's almost like kitty OCD a little bit. To give a little bit of explanation, they attack their tails. She's done it since I first got her as a kitten, but it's been like, sporadic on and off, like a couple times a week, and now it's gotten she does it. She's been doing it for like 24 hours straight, and I'm figuring it out. Don't worry, I've spoken to a vet, so this is not something I'm just like, just like losing my mind over with trying not to get it. She's gonna get into her vet. And at the moment, I'm just very tired. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go. Thanks for hanging in here with me. And wear your sunscreen, drink your water, and go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.